Welcome to Your Vote Counts, candidate interviews sponsored by Capital Community TV and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. My name is Diana Bodker, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate ourselves and the public about government issues and civic responsibilities. In this program, we will present the candidates for the Legislative Senate District 13. They are alphabetically Sarah Greider and Kim Thatcher. Our format for this program is as follows. Each candidate has 3 minutes to give an opening statement outlining their background qualifications and top priorities if elected. Following that, each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer questions that have been prepared by League members on current issues. The candidates were not given the questions ahead of time. At the end, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement in which to state the legacy they would like to leave if elected to that office. Seating was not designated and question-response order will rotate. We will begin with Ms. Greider as a candidate A for her opening remarks. Ms. Greider.
My name is Sarah Greider, and I'm the candidate for Senate District 13. I began my adult life as an active duty military member in the Army, and after that I went on to work in law enforcement at Portland Community College. I worked in the Women's Resource Center there, helping students experiencing trauma and violence and crisis. I have a degree in criminal justice. I have a degree in communications, which I use now currently as my position as an educational assistant at Newburgh High School. How these positions lend themselves to being a leader is that I've worked in my communities. I've worked hand in hand in collaborative teams and assessing things that needed to be done, and hard work is not something that's foreign to me. I feel like I represent many of the members in my district that are currently not being heard in Salem. I feel like my background also in law enforcement and emergency preparedness is something that is really missing as a voice in Salem, and as a state we need to become more prepared for mass casualty incidents.
All right, Ms. Thatcher.
Thank you. I'm Kim Thatcher. I'm your state senator, and I'm running for re-election in Senate District 13. And I did serve 10 years in the House of Representatives in Oregon. I'm a business owner, mother of 4, grandmother of 5, been married 34 years now. I am a bipartisan candidate. I was nominated by the Republican and Independent as well as Libertarian parties of Oregon. I've always seen it as my job to listen to everyone, no matter what party one identifies with or doesn't identify with. And it's been my focus all along to make Oregon a great place to live, work, go to school, and raise a family. And as such, I think we need to focus on education. We need to focus on homelessness, being able to afford a home to live in, and government transparency and fiscal responsibility. These all play hand in hand. And with education, excuse me, we have such great resources in this state, and we need to do better for our kids. They are having a difficult time graduating. We have low graduation rates, large class sizes, and we need to do better. And going around the state on the Joint Committee on Student Success has been eye-opening. Been talking with hundreds of people, including colleges, business owners, administrators, school principals, and students, and everybody wants to work with the schools. And so all these local resources that are unique to each school district need to be leveraged, and everybody that in these local districts wants to help their local schools. And so I want to help facilitate that. I want to help bring in priorities in our government so that we fund education first and empower parents to decide where and how their child's needs are best served. And since an education experience is so influenced by what is happening at home, we need to do something to make our houses more affordable. It's hard to find a place to live around the state, and more people than ever are homeless. And I think it's totally unnecessary. We have a very expensive way of building homes. We have an antiquated land use system that needs to be worked on, and all this adds more expense to living in our state. We need to take care of that. We have taxes going up, fees being raised, and we, more than ever before, we need a transparency website. And so that is something I've worked on, and it's now an internationally recognized transparency website so people can access information on how their tax money is being spent.
All right, thank you. Ms. Thatcher, what do you recommend to make Oregon's infrastructure and population more resilient to seismic, flood, and wildfire disasters?
That's a really good topic. I think we have a lot of work to do in our state. It was fun having town halls, inviting our various state agencies that deal with resiliency and being able to withstand the Cascadia subduction earthquake that they are predicting will happen here at some point. They don't know when. We need to make sure our citizens have the tools they need to get through those times when there are these large emergencies. We need to train our local CERT teams, et cetera. We have some really good CERT teams in the district that are well trained to deal with emergencies, and we need to make sure we have arterials open when it comes time for this earthquake to happen. We need to make sure that things can get to where they need to go and people can get the help they need, and that we can rebuild quickly.
All right, thank you. Ms. Grider.
Well, I think first of all that we need to address some of the resources being put into these systems right now. There does unfortunately need to be more money toward funding and shoring up our infrastructure. A lot of our bridges aren't prepared for the types of traffic flow to evacuate or move resources that we would need during these mass casualty incidents. So that number one needs to be addressed, the funding resources. So looking at restructuring the corporate tax structure here so that there is more funding to make sure that our physical infrastructure is ready for those types of incidents. Second, I think looking at the numbers of people living in poverty, having studied Hurricane Katrina, having family in the region, and also experiencing living in logging country in Washington State growing up, and understanding that a fair amount of our citizens aren't ready, aren't prepared, and don't have the resources to sit in place for 72 hours, let alone longer when these incidents happen. So creating community resources and addressing people living in poverty to be prepared to shelter in place during those types of incidents. And then also looking at collaborating with community agencies to better prepare and train for those things.
Thank you. After several years with the coordinated care model for the Oregon Health Plan, what is your opinion of its implementation, and would you propose any changes statewide?
Yes, I think more people need to have access to healthcare in Oregon. So I think anytime we can make the system more accessible to everyone and not so filled with barriers for people who have different languages, for people who don't have transportation to be able to get into our state agency offices to sign up for those things, are just some of the ways that healthcare can be more accessible to folks in Oregon. I think the Oregon Health Plan has really great intentions, but unfortunately when we don't work well together and don't communicate together, things get a little, when things don't work well together when we're not talking. So increasing communication, breaking down barriers, and also looking at more sustainable funding options so that some of the best intentions are not unfunded mandates, that they're supported and everyone has health care.
Thank you. Ms. Thatcher.
CCO started out with a really good and innovative concept, and that's to make sure that services are coordinated between the different caregivers for a particular person or a particular patient, because one person who might need some help with a mental health illness may also need some help with their diabetic medication. And so coordinating these needs, it really made some sense. Now, to me, it's amazing that state workers are not part of CCOs. I think that would save a tremendous amount of money if we allowed or mandated that state workers, including legislators, were part of the CCOs. I think we could save a lot of money on our health insurance. That would be one thing I would look to change.
All right, thank you. Ms. Thatcher, do you think the balance between individual and corporate taxes is appropriate? And please relate this to your vision of an ideal Oregon tax structure.
Ideal Oregon tax structure. That's the one where somebody else pays the tax. I think that's what everybody wants. But in reality, we've tried sales tax 9 times now, I believe, and I think what I hear from people is that most people don't want to pay a sales tax because they don't trust that the property taxes would go down or be eliminated, or that the income tax would go down or be eliminated, and that they would just eventually raise all 3. And so people don't trust that situation. Now, you're talking about the balance between the corporate and personal income taxes. I think we have high taxes, period. And we tax our businesses at a higher percentage than most states. I think 11.25 is the top rate. But when you look at income taxes through personal income tax returns versus income taxes through corporate returns, the corporate returns have gone down, and that's because different business models are being adopted that run like a limited liability corporation or a C corporate or S corporation that runs through a person's personal income tax, and so that's more advantageous for those businesses because that's a lower rate. The personal rate is lower than what they would be paying through the corporate rate, and so it's hard to say that there's not a good balance.
All right, thank you. Ms. Grider?
I feel like a lot of folks in Oregon are in a predicament where income tax for them is high, and a lot of corporations are paying proportionately low taxes compared to what we were paying and the corporations were paying in the 1970s here in Oregon. And I think that looking at how our communities have changed, how there's much more industrial areas, large corporations that are taxing our transportation systems and other systems in our state, that I feel like they need to be paying their fair share. And also, some of those corporations aren't paying family sustaining wages, so we're seeing a lot of their workers being put on social systems that the other taxpayers and individual taxpayers are paying for those systems in the state of Oregon. So I think that ideally in the tax system in Oregon, corporations would be paying more and individuals would be paying less. Also looking at the kicker, that having those funds held for a rainy day and to help sustain some of those infrastructure programs like we were talking about before, so people are prepared for rainy days and mass casualty incidents like the earthquake that we keep talking about coming.
All right, thank you. All right. Ms. Grider, are you satisfied with the redistricting process in Oregon, and are you interested in suggesting reforms?
I think any time we talk about redistricting, it's never going to be perfect because there's always somebody who's going to benefit more than someone else. And so the system is never going to be perfect for everyone. How it works in Oregon is somewhat fair topically, but we know that our state is changing so drastically, so quickly, that with demographics changing every day, the influx of people from outside the state, that having it done more often and with more input from communities would be beneficial.
All right, Ms. Thatcher.
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. I was in the legislature when we did our last redistricting, and it was the first time in a long, long time that the legislature actually passed a redistricting plan and didn't punt it up to the Secretary of State's office. Having said that, though, I do think it would be better to have less interested parties structuring the districting of our state. It doesn't, like District 13, it doesn't make sense that it goes from Kaiser and basically almost a straight line up to the south part of Hillsborough. It doesn't include any of Salem. It doesn't include, I mean, it just includes just a little portion of Hillsborough. It doesn't make sense. I think that there are some ideas out there that could be adopted. I've heard of proposals to perhaps have retired judges redistrict, perhaps a bipartisan commission that's been appointed. I think there are ways of approaching redistricting and taking it out of the hands of the partisans who would be affected by it.
All right, thank you. Ms. Thatcher, in your view, what is the legislature's role in combating climate change, and how high is it on your legislative priority list?
How high is my priority on climate change? I know that there are a number of proposals that are coming to the legislature that will that are for the purpose of combating climate change. Not the least of which is the cap and trade and invest. I think that's been added to the terminology now. And that would involve taxing, basically charging businesses for their emissions outputs. I don't see that as beneficial. I think it would be harmful to the citizens of the state because all those costs would roll downhill, and it would be people paying for that. And I don't see that there'd be much benefit. I don't see how what is done here in this state, which is very green. We have forests, we have all kinds of sinks for the CO2. I think I would rather focus on planting more trees and being responsible and harvesting our trees, and less on trying to micromanage or give, I guess, indulgences to industry for their CO2 emissions.
All right, Ms. Greider.
I take a more proactive and preventative stance. Unfortunately, it's too late to prevent climate change, but we can take a proactive stance. We know from the data that exponentially temperature changes are happening much quicker than we thought that they were. So the amount of fresh water, the amount of temperature rising in our local bodies of water, as we saw with Salem and their drinking water, and the algae bloom that happened way earlier in this season than we've ever seen it. In our district, I've talked to many farmers who are looking for land way north, even as far as Canada, to plant crops, because already the growing zone for their crops has moved. It's too hot to grow their crops. So I feel like we need to be more aggressive and proactive, and in the long run, we're making policy and legislating for our future, not for what we're doing right now. So the legacy we're leaving our kids should be more proactive.
Thank you. And they have the next question. Traffic congestion is an increasing problem in Oregon metropolitan areas. What measures to address this issue have you considered?
Well, I think looking at the economies of some of our localities, we have in the Senate district, we have folks who are commuter towns. We have folks like Wilsonville, that a majority of the people who live in Wilsonville actually work in Wilsonville, but they do have commuters. So bringing in family sustaining wage jobs into the district, so people aren't riding transportation, aren't driving as much to their jobs, is something that we can do to help combat some of the transportation issues. Also looking at investing in our infrastructure. The Boone Bridge right now is sort of at its max of capacity, and so looking at maybe adding a second bridge at some point so that that traffic congestion can be eased, but also investing in our mass public transportation systems as well.
All right, thank you. Ms. Thatcher.
Trying to recall the question. I think it was about, can you say it again, please? I'm sorry.
Traffic congestion is an increasing problem in Oregon metropolitan areas. Yes. What measures to address this issue have you considered?
Thank you. Since about the mid-90s, our state has determined that all we're going to do is maintain our roads. We're not going to build more roads, and I think we're unfortunately reaping the results of that decision. And it's unfortunate. I think that that disinvestment in our infrastructure, in our transportation infrastructure, is wreaking all kinds of havoc. And when it comes to our transportation, we need to do a multifaceted approach. I do agree that we need to have mass transportation options for people. Is very helpful, but we don't want to forget people that want to just drive their cars. They want to be independent. They want to make a trip and structure that trip and bundle their activities in such a way that makes sense for them. I think we could maybe even incentivize employers to have different schedules so there isn't just one mass rush hour and at different times of day. There are different things that can be done, and I think helping reduce congestion is the highest priority for dealing with our infrastructure, and taking away lanes to add bikes and taking away lanes to for these minor transportation issues, even though they're important. I think it's caused too much of an expense for people who drive.
All right, thank you. I would like to ask you for your closing statement now.
Okay. All right. Well, I have enjoyed serving in the State Senate. It's been a privilege and an honor to represent the people of Senate District 13. And I've had the experience of working across the aisle. In fact, as a member of the minority party, that's the only way something can get done, is working across the aisle. So I've had years of experience in doing that. It was interesting when I passed legislation to create the Oregon Transparency website, working with the Democrats, my Democrat colleagues, and there was a little bit of suspicion as to, well, why do you want to do this? And I said, well, why do you want to do this? But I think we both want to do this. I wanted to show people, what maybe government could be doing better, and they wanted to show people all the great things government was doing for them. And so it just came down to the fact that we both wanted to show the people. And in so doing, we were able to work together, because I think there's so much more that unites than divides. And finding that common ground and being able to come forward with some legislation that benefits everyone. That's my goal. I'm here to listen, and it doesn't matter which party you're with. I look forward to having any discussions with you and hearing your ideas. Come visit me at my website, kim@kimthatcher.com. It's actually kimthatcher.com. That's my email address. But anyway, and visit me on Facebook. I'm here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ryder, your closing statement.
As someone who's worked in communities for my entire adult life, I know the issues that are facing Oregonians on a very personal level. Working inside a high school every day and seeing what our kids are facing as they graduate, student loan debt, the possibility of not getting careers that are available within their job fields that they've gotten education in, and also community problems, social issues like racism, sexism, homophobia in our communities. I see every day how those issues affect everyone in their everyday lives. As someone who also works with laborers and working in my union, I see how workers are facing inadequate wages, insecure retirements, and the possibility of not having job securities from one day to the next. In the future, I think we can do better with representation of people who've worked in our communities, who have faced the barriers and challenges that they have, and changing our approach, because what's happening now obviously isn't working for a lot of Oregonians. And so coming up with innovative ways to work together and being proactive in the long run will save us so much more and make our communities so much more comfortable. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to sarahgreiter.org and visit me on Facebook as well. Thank you.
All right. That is all the time we have. I thank you both. You have been watching Your Vote Counts candidate interviews for Legislative Senate District 13 with Ms. Sarah Greiter and Ms. Kim Thatcher. We hope you will watch our other candidate forums, and please see CCTV website for time and dates. These forums are a public service to voters to become more acquainted with candidates who hope to lead our city, county, and state governments in the coming years. The last day to register to vote or make changes to your registration is October the 16th. Ballots will be mailed on or about October the 17th and should be returned by November 6th at 8 p.m. Postmarks do not count. We urge you to make democracy work and be a voter. This is Diana Bodker for the League of Women Voters and CCTV, thanking you for watching Your Vote Counts.